Okay, so get this. You've heard about Cold War spies, right? But have you ever heard of one being held in a Chinese prison for like over 20 years?
Oh, wow.
That's the story we're diving into today. John T. Downey, a CIA operative whose life, I mean, it reads like a Cold War thriller.
It's a fascinating story and one that really pulls back the curtain, in the early days of the CIA. We're
Yeah.
talking about the 1950s, a time of just immense paranoia. I mean, America was terrified of communist expansion. The Korean War was raging on.
Right.
And the CIA, this brand new agency, modeled after Britain's MI6, was eager to prove itself.
Yeah, it's almost like they were the new kids on the block
Exactly.
trying to, make a name for themselves.
Exactly. And that led to some, shall we say, ambitious operations.
Mm-hmm.
Take, for instance, their first attempt at waging a secret war in Albania, a complete disaster.
Really?
Agents were captured, families were punished. It was just a brutal wake-up call for the agency.
Wow, I hadn't heard about that. So how does John T. Downey, or Jack, as he was known, fit into all of this?
Well, Jack was a Yale graduate.
Yeah.
He was the epitome of, the best and brightest his generation had to offer.
Mm.
He was smart. He was athletic, a natural leader. Think of him as kind of the ambitious younger brother of the greatest generation, eager to make their mark on the world.
Yeah.
And get this, 10% of Yale's 1951 graduating class joined the CIA.
10%. That's wild. I guess, fighting communism was seen as the ultimate call to duty back then.
It was.
So what kind of work did they have Jack doing?
Well, the CIA was fixated on these secret wars in Asia, particularly in China.
Mm-hmm.
They believed they could undermine the communist government by supporting anti-communist groups within the country, what they called third force elements.
Third force. What does that even mean?
Basically, exiled Chinese dissidents who opposed the communist regime.
Okay.
The CIA saw them as a potential force for change within China. The problem was these groups barely existed.
Huh.
The whole third force concept was more of a, I guess, wishful thinking than a reality.
So the CIA was basing their entire strategy on, a phantom army.
They were.
That seems incredibly risky.
It was, and it highlights the flawed assumptions and intelligence they were working with at the time.
Wow.
They were dropping agents into Manchuria, hoping to link up with this non-existent resistance and establish a foothold.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
What could possibly go wrong, right?
Exactly. And of course, things went very wrong.
Yeah.
The first team they sent in vanished without a trace. Poof, gone.
Wow.
The second team, captured and turned by the Chinese,
Oh, no.
becoming unwitting pawns in this much larger game.
This is where it gets crazy, right?
Yeah.
I read about the CIA's plan to extract one of the turned agents.
Yeah.
It involved a C-47 flying at treetop level, a winch, and a harness,
Yeah.
basically trying to snatch a human being like a fish out of water.
It sounds absolutely insane, and it was. But it speaks to the, I guess, almost reckless confidence of the CIA at the time. They genuinely believed they could pull off anything.
Mm-hmm.
They were like, a bunch of kids playing cowboys and Indians, except the stakes were incredibly real.
And that's where Jack comes in.
Yes, when civilian contractors backed out of the mission, Jack volunteered.
Really?
He's incredibly brave, almost to a fault, and unfortunately, he flew straight into a trap.
Wait, the Chinese knew about the operation.
They knew everything. They had infiltrated the operation from the start and were monitoring every move the CIA made.
Wow.
They knew Jack was coming. They knew his name. His capture was a massive propaganda victory for them.
It makes you wonder how many other operations were compromised like that.
Exactly.
So what happened to the plane?
It was shot down, bursting into flames on impact.
Oh my gosh.
Miraculously, both Jack and his partner survived the crash, but their ordeal was far from over.
I bet. They were surrounded by Chinese soldiers, miles from friendly territory.
Right.
And their own government didn't even acknowledge they existed.
Right.
It must have felt like the end of the world.
It must have. That's what we'll dive into next.
Okay.
The cover-up, the denial, and the long years of Jack's imprisonment.
This is already so intense. I can't wait to hear what happened next. So we left off with Jack and his partner surviving this, fiery plane crash.
Right.
Only to be captured by the Chinese.
Right.
What happened next?
Well, here's where the story takes a truly disturbing turn.
Okay.
Back in the U.S., the CIA decided to cover up the entire incident.
Seriously?
Yeah.
They just pretended it never happened.
They concocted a story about a civilian plane disappearing over the Sea of Japan.
Wow.
They even told Jack's family he was likely dead.
It's hard to fathom the pain his family must have gone through,
I know.
not knowing the truth, grieving for someone who is still alive.
Right.
But why go to such lengths to cover it up?
It all boiled down to protecting their image and their operations. Acknowledging Jack as a spy would have jeopardized their entire Asian network and undermined the CIA's credibility on the world stage.
Yeah.
They were willing to sacrifice him to protect their secrets.
That's a chilling thought.
It is.
So for 2 years, Jack's fate was shrouded in mystery.
Yeah.
Did the Chinese ever acknowledge they had him?
They did, but not until 2 years later.
Okay.
In 1954, they announced Jack's capture and sentenced him to life in prison, accusing him of insurrection.
Right. He was literally trying to, support a rebellion against their government.
He was.
But what about the U.S.? Did they finally admit the truth?
Not a chance.
Really?
The Eisenhower administration, with those infamous Dulles brothers at the helm,
Right.
doubled down on their denials.
Wow.
They denounced China's actions and insisted Jack was unlawfully detained.
It's mind-boggling that they could maintain this charade for so long.
It is.
You mentioned the Dulles brothers.
Yeah.
Weren't they pretty powerful figures back then?
They were like the architects of the Cold War mentality. Allen Dulles was the director of the CIA, and his brother, John Foster Dulles, was the Secretary of State.
Right.
They believed in the domino theory, the idea that if one country fell to communism,
Yeah.
others would follow,
Right.
and they were willing to do whatever it took to stop it.
And that included abandoning one of their own.
It did.
It's a dark chapter in American history.
It is.
But let's shift our focus back to Jack.
Okay.
What was it like for him during those early days of captivity?
It must have been absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
He was completely isolated, facing a system with no regard for the Geneva Conventions.
Right.
He knew the Chinese could do anything they wanted with him.
Yeah.
He was at their mercy.
Did he break under interrogation?
He resisted for 16 days before finally admitting he was CIA.
Oh, wow.
But even then, he displayed incredible resilience and cunning.
Uh-huh.
Instead of giving a verbal confession, he insisted on writing it down.
What was he up to?
He brilliantly buried real intelligence under mountains of trivial details. Thousands of pages filled with deliberate obfuscation.
So he basically weaponized bureaucracy against
Exactly.
it. That's amazing.
It was a testament to his intelligence and his unyielding spirit.
Mm-hmm.
You see, Jack understood the power of language.
Yeah.
He consciously rejected the idea of being brainwashed.
Right. He wasn't going to let them take his soul.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He held on to his identity, his sense of self, even in the face of unimaginable pressure.
That's an incredibly powerful insight.
It is.
It wasn't just about resisting information. It was about resisting a complete mental takeover.
It was.
How did he cope with prison life in the long term?
Right.
We're talking about decades here.
His resilience was truly remarkable.
Yeah.
He adapted to his circumstances, creating a strict routine of exercise, reading, and meticulous cleaning.
Wow.
He became, as he put it, the busiest man in Beijing, all within the confines of his tiny cell.
There's something both inspiring and heartbreaking about that image.
There is.
Finding purpose and structure within such a restrictive environment.
Yeah.
Was he tortured?
He maintained he wasn't physically tortured,
Okay.
although he endured harsh interrogations and sleep deprivation.
Right.
The Chinese may have recognized his value as a prisoner, but they certainly didn't make life easy for him.
There's also this interesting detail that he refused to learn Chinese,
Right.
seeing it as a form of surrender.
He did, yeah.
Yet he taught himself Russian while in prison.
It did.
That speaks volumes about his character.
It does.
He was a learner, always seeking knowledge, even in captivity.
Yeah.
Learning Russian was almost an act of defiance,
It was.
a way of asserting his independence and control within a system designed to break him.
Exactly.
But through all of this, he was clinging to the belief that his government was working tirelessly for his release, right?
He was.
He had no idea about the cover-up,
Right.
the political hurdles preventing any negotiation.
Right.
It's one of the most tragic aspects of his story.
It is.
He spent years hoping for a rescue that was never coming.
I know.
This whole situation is so messed up,
Yeah.
it makes you question everything about power, loyalty, and the true cost of these covert operations.
Absolutely.
So how did things finally change for Jack?
Yeah.
What led to that breakthrough after all those years?
Well, that's where we'll pick up next time.
Okay.
The unexpected turn of events that finally opened the door to Jack's release.
So Jack's, languishing in this Chinese prison,
Right.
completely abandoned by his own government.
Yeah.
What happened that finally led to his release after, 2 decades?
Well, the winds of change started blowing, I guess, with Nixon's visit to China in 1972.
Right.
It was a seismic shift in Cold War politics,
Mm-hmm.
opening up this dialogue between the two superpowers.
Right.
This thaw in relations created a kind of window of opportunity,
Yeah.
a chance to address Jack's case.
It's amazing how a single event can just reshape the, geopolitical landscape.
Yeah,
But it wasn't just Nixon, right? I read that one of Jack's Yale classmates
Yes.
played a key role in his release.
Absolutely. This classmate, realizing the political stalemate,
Yeah.
started advocating for a more pragmatic approach.
Okay.
He suggested that the U.S. finally acknowledge Jack as a spy
Wow.
and apologize for the incursion.
It must have been a tough pill to swallow,
It was.
Admitting to their actions after years of denial.
Yes.
Did they actually do it?
They did at a press conference in 1973.
Okay.
Nixon publicly acknowledged Jack as a CIA agent,
Wow.
ending, 2 decades of official lies.
Can you imagine what that moment must have been like for Jack?
Oh, I can.
To finally be acknowledged,
Right.
to know that his government was no longer pretending he didn't exist.
It must have been an overwhelming mix of, relief, vindication,
Yeah.
and perhaps even anger at the
The years wasted.
and that paved the way for his release.
It did. Henry Kissinger,
Okay.
Nixon's Secretary of State. Mm-hmm.
Played a crucial role
Right.
pushing for Jack's freedom during his secret trips to China.
Wow.
He even made a personal appeal to Zhou Enlai,
Okay.
emphasizing the humanitarian aspect of the situation.
So after all those years of silence and deception,
Right.
a simple acknowledgement of the truth,
Right.
coupled with some, savvy diplomacy, was enough to bring Jack home.
It's a testament to the power of truth and reconciliation, even in, the most complex political situations.
But the story doesn't end there.
It doesn't.
Imagine, stepping back into a world you haven't seen in 20 years.
Right.
Everything you knew, everyone you loved, it's all changed.
Yeah.
It's like being like a Rip Van Winkle of the Cold War.
Exactly.
How did he readjust to life back in America?
It's remarkable how quickly he bounced back.
Yeah.
He seemed to harbor no bitterness towards the Chinese
Hmm.
or his own government.
That's amazing.
He focused on the future, enrolling in Harvard Law School,
Wow.
after Yale inexplicably rejected his application.
Rejected by his own alma mater. Talk about adding insult to injury.
I know.
But it sounds like he didn't let that setback define him.
Not at all. He thrived at Harvard and, incredibly,
Yeah.
found love amidst all the upheaval.
Oh, wow.
He met a woman named Audrey,
Okay.
a lab technician at Yale whose family had fled China during the Communist Revolution.
It's almost like fate brought them together, two lives intertwined by the very conflict that had separated them for so long.
Yeah, their connection was instant and profound.
Uh-huh.
They fell deeply in love and married within a year.
What a beautiful testament to the, human capacity for love and connection, even after enduring such hardship.
I agree.
What did Jack do after law school?
He became a respected judge in Connecticut,
Okay.
known for his fairness, his compassion, and his deep understanding of the human condition.
It's almost poetic. After being denied justice for so long, he dedicated his life to ensuring justice for others.
Exactly. It speaks to his character, his resilience, his empathy, and his unwavering belief in the power of redemption.
And to think, a courthouse in New Haven now bears his name, a lasting tribute to his legacy.
It is.
Jack Downey's story is a wild ride, a tale of espionage, betrayal, resilience, and ultimately redemption.
Absolutely.
It's a story that forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about the human cost of war and the ethical dilemmas faced by those in power.
And the power of the human spirit.
It also reminds us that even in the darkest of circumstances,
Right.
the human spirit can endure.
It can.
Jack's story is a beacon of hope, proof that even after unimaginable hardship, it's possible to rebuild, to love, and to find meaning in life.
And to forgive.
It's a story that stays with you, a reminder that history is made up of individual lives,
Yes.
each one filled with complexities, triumphs, and tragedies.
It is.
So the next time you hear about a spy or a covert operation, remember Jack Downey.
Yeah.
Remember the human being behind the headlines, the individual whose life was forever altered by the machinations of governments and the tides of history.
A fascinating story.
And ask yourself, What would you have done in his shoes? How would you have coped with 20 years of isolation and uncertainty? What would you have done differently? It's a question worth pondering, a reminder that even in an age of, global politics and technological marvels,
Yes.
it's the human stories, the individual journeys that truly resonate and shape our understanding of the world.